Shutdown for profit. In retrospect, shutdown for profit. In retrospect, the forensics of theft. Imagine a shutdown not as the end of spending, but the opening of shadow channels. The lights dim. The press loses interest. Oversight freezes. But the ledger still hums. Because the truth is, money moves whether the government is open or not. The only question is who gets to move it and who is watching when they do. Step 1. The delay game. Picture an ecosystem where every contract signed has a shadow date attached to it. Payments aren't denied, they re-deferred. Work is greenlit, projects begin, labor is performed, and then silence. The shutdown becomes the rationale. The legal framing is soft, pending reauthorization or on hold until resolution. The money remains in the system, hovering in suspension. Now ask, what happens to funds that aren't paid but are still allocated? Step 2. The proxy shell. In that space of delay, intermediaries flourish. Not the contractors named in public contracts, but the quiet firms behind them. Shell companies with ambiguous service descriptions. Emergency procurement entities. Consulting firms no one has heard of. They arrive with new invoices, new routing numbers, and quiet permissions. When asked who authorized them, the answer is vague. And when the fog lifts, the money is gone. Step 3. Overnight liquidity. Here's where finance steps in. Idle funds can still be moved in overnight markets. Repo agreements, short-term lending, crypto arbitrage. These funds never vanish. Instead, they reuse for a day, a night, maybe just long enough to earn interest or turn a digital corner. They are technically repaid, but not before they've served another purpose. Step 4. The digital wash. A new accounting trick enters the scene: payment in digital assets. Not directly from the Treasury, of course, but through the intermediaries. Crypto is used not because it's innovative, but because it's unregulated. Stablecoins, offshore exchanges, and anonymized wallets ensure that a federal contract can result in no traditional money trail at all. And when asked where the money went, the answer is simple: it was converted. Step 5. The paper trail mirage. When shutdowns end, accountability resumes in theory. But now the paperwork has been retroactively updated. Payments have been reconciled. Budgets align. And yet on the ground, hospitals didn't get supplies. Schools didn't get grants. Agencies didn't hire staff. The trail is there. The product never arrived. The red ledger. This is the accounting of complicity. Not just of numbers, but of people. The inner circle. Begin with the appointees. They are the sentinels of access. Loyalty outweighs. Their job is not to lead but to delay, sign, and obscure. With every ambiguous memo or postponed payment, they create the vacuum necessary for manipulation to thrive. They are not the architects. They are the door holders. The external arm. These are the beneficiaries. Real estate partners, defense contractors, public relations firms, prison operators. They orbit power and know when to step inches. They anticipate shutdowns like weather systems, pulling projects, deferring shipments, waiting for chaos to unlock discretionary awards. They are rarely on the front page, but always at the payout. The digital launderers. They are the engineers of invisibility. Blockchain architects. Crypto custodians. Offshore payment processors. They don't steal. Instead, they anonymize. They offer a service, movement without memory. When public funds disappear into tokenized assets, their role is not criminal, commercial. They are paid not to ask questions, but to write code, to generate clean ledgers, to build platforms that obscure provenance, reduce traceability, and offer plausible deniability. These actors operate in jurisdictions where financial transparency laws are lax or non-existent. One transaction splits into hundreds. A single budget line becomes fragmented across wallets, smart contracts, and liquidity pools. The money flows into stablecoins, runs through synthetic assets, then is reconstituted into cash, equity, or luxury goods. And because the medium is code, not cash, it moves faster than regulation can comprehend. while governments prepare reports, digital assets cross continents. Now imagine this not as a trickle, but as a $1 trillion spigot. Imagine what a gangster could do. He is not a street thug, but a refined multinational operator with access to the flow. Picture a scenario where billions allocated for infrastructure, defense, health, or emergency response are routed through friendly shell vendors. Those vendors convert the payments into crypto. The crypto is staked, swapped, or routed through mixers. A few steps later, the same money funds a hedge fund in Singapore, a luxury condo in Miami, or a surveillance startup in Tel Aviv. There is no trace because the system was built to be untraceable. These are not bags of cash in the trunk of a car. These are digital shadows that mimic legitimacy. And with each successful laundering cycle, the architecture gets smarter, more automated, more decentralized. Even regulators can't agree on where jurisdiction begins or ends. The gangster doesn't need to hack the government. He simply needs to be adjacent to it, to have someone on the inside, to get the contract, to convert the payment. Once the funds leave the public domain, they don't return as taxes or reinvestment. They return as influence such as campaign donations, media control, offshore pressure. This is not hypothetical. This is the blueprint. And shutdowns provide the perfect cloak. No oversight, no auditing, no attention. The real tally. And what remains? Departments that function as facades. Budgets that appear balanced on paper, while services quietly vanish. Agencies that boast reform, while internally hemorrhaging staff, expertise, and operational capacity. Nation programs exist but only technically. The funding was allocated, the contract signed, the press release published. But the follow-through is stalled. The deliverables are late. The outcomes are hollow. Services that once anchored public trust, emergency response, food assistance, healthcare clinics, educational support, environmental protections begin to erode. Not all at once, but piece by piece. A shuttered office here, a delayed benefit there, a missing inspector, a skipped audit. This is not collapse. It is corrosion. The illusion of performance masks the extraction of value. Consultants generate impact reports. Dashboards show progress. But those numbers are polished shells, disconnected from lived experience. Meanwhile, public institutions shrink in scope while private contractors grow. Public money flows into firms that do the same job with less accountability. Expertise is outsourced. Oversight is bypassed. And what was once a functioning civil service becomes a marketplace of favors. For the average citizen, the experience is confusion. Forms take longer, calls don't get returned, offices are temporarily closed. But for those managing the system from within, we're just close enough to benefit its profit by design. The real tally is not in dollars lost. It is in trust dissolved. In the quiet transformation of a republic into a rent-seeking operation. In the slow, normalized siphoning of public purpose into private gain. And unless confronted, that corrosion becomes permanent. Retrospect. The global shadow network. This is the international dimension of the scam. Convert the narrative. Fraud isn't labeled as such. It's policy, emergency authorization, strategic preparedness. The words are meant to sound responsible. But the goal is always the same: unlock money fast and delay oversight. And behind this language, the main player orchestrating it has a well-documented history not of innovation, but of fraud. Donald Trump, in nearly every private enterprise he touched, left a trail of unpaid contractors, bankrupt projects, and overvalued assets and quietly settled lawsuits. From Trump University to the Trump Foundation, from Atlantic City casinos to inflated property deals, his method was always the same: overpromise. Extract value, avoid accountability. In government, this approach wasn't discarded, it was scaled. Policy became pretext. Emergencies became cover. What would be criminal in the private sector was rebranded as executive strategy. And as the language shifted, so too did the public's ability to recognize theft in real time. export the proceeds. That money must then move. So it leaves through tax havens, anonymous LLCs, and foreign real estate. A penthouse in Cyprus. A villa in the Caymans. A golf course under a cousin's name in Ireland. Legal ownership is always 2 steps removed. But the connections are not. Institutional camouflage. It's not just hiding. It's embedding. The stolen funds become donations, investments, equity stakes. They fund banks, influence policy, build alliances. Try tracing a contract payout that turned into a campaign donation through 4 intermediaries. ULL find a wall. Reinjection is leverage. Then the money returns. Not directly, but through lobbying, platform acquisition, political favor. It returns as power, not currency. The final illusion. This is the genius of it. The public sees nothing. Headlines say record budget. Agencies claim they are funded. But the services never materialize. Because the budget wasn't the plan, it was the bait. ACA, the forensics unwrapping of the nation DASIC. Consider a department that grows in funding even as its performance metrics stay flat or worse, decline. Year after year, the Department of Homeland Security, and particularly IC, has justified increased funding on the basis of national security and immigration enforcement needs. Currently has $160,000 million.00. Yet the number of actual detainees fluctuates with policy shifts and legal constraints, often declining in moments of scrutiny. So why do the budgets only grow? C inflates its bed quotas, projecting inflated estimates for detainee populations that don't materialize. These inflated projections justify contracts with private prison companies, who are paid to maintain capacity regardless of whether that capacity is used. It's a guaranteed income stream for detention facilities that can bill for empty beds. But it goes deeper. The detention and deportation infrastructure is heavily outsourced. Transport logistics, food services, surveillance equipment, healthcare provisions, and security personnel are all contracted out to private vendors. These vendors receive award letters and signed agreements, anticipating payments tied to IC's budget lines. Then comes the shutdown. Suddenly payments pause. The excuse is simple: government functions are temporarily suspended. Donald Trump's reputation for stiffing people isn't a rumor, it's a record. From construction workers to law firms, he's made a career of delaying, disputing, and denying payments. He promises big contracts, then when the work is done, the excuses begin: shoddy work, missed deadlines, legal disputes. He threatens litigation, offers pennies on the dollar, or just ghosts vendors entirely. Hundreds of small businesses and contractors were left unpaid through his bankruptcies and settlements. For Trump, the job was never about paying the bill, it was about extracting the value and walking away before the check clears. And yet, those budgets remain allocated and technically unspent. The money sits in departmental ledgers, untouched, not monitored, and not reviewed. Some contractors wait. Others walk away. In the meantime, those funds are not idle. They may be moved, repositioned, leveraged, or diverted, all under the cover of fiscal paralysis. There is no emergency hearing. No sudden oversight rush. Because from the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. But inside the machinery, the bait and switch is working as intended. Promise the work, pause the payout, keep the budget. This is not about enforcement. It's about engineered surplus. Nation commerce. Tariff policies shift week to week, creating unstable markets. But instability creates opportunity for those who have advance notice. Within the Department of Commerce, this volatility is not just a policy side effect, it becomes the product itself. Lobbyists position themselves to receive early intelligence on upcoming tariff changes. With even a few days' notice, companies can reposition supply chains, adjust orders, or hedge against price shocks. By Orion Carl Daly, 18. Shutdown for profit. In retrospect, meanwhile, businesses operating in good faith are blindsided by sudden rate increases on raw materials, components, or finished goods. Waivers are quietly granted, but not through transparent process. Companies with the right connections gain exemptions, while others face crushing costs. This selective leniency turns the waiver process into a profit machine for insiders. It's no longer about protecting American industry. It's about determining which businesses get to survive based on their proximity to influence. American manufacturers, particularly small to mid-sized ones, are left behind. Caught between unpredictable import costs and offshore competitors receiving exemptions, they lose contracts, cut jobs, and shutter factories. All of this happens in the name of economic security. But in reality, it's a form of economic warfare, with Washington deciding who takes the hit and who cashes inches. And during a shutdown, oversight on tariff policy slows or stops. Internal watchdogs are furloughed. Public reporting stalls. But commerce still operates behind the curtain, and those with access still get the first phone call. In this game, the public pays more and gets less. But for those in the know, the payoff is baked into the policy. Transportation FAA. Shutdowns freeze infrastructure upgrades. Projects that were greenlit are mothballed. Contractors are told to wait. The official explanation is budgetary uncertainty, a temporary halt. But what appears as indecision is often pretext. In that pause, new bids go out. Not to the original contractors, but to firms with ties, political, personal, or financial, to decision-makers operating behind closed doors. The scope of the project may shift. Terms may be adjusted. The budget may increase. But the key players change. In retrospect, infrastructure projects, airports, bridges, transit hubs are particularly vulnerable. These are long-term, high-dollar efforts with complex schedules and multiple stakeholders. When shutdowns hit, timelines collapse. But in that collapse, the opportunity emerges to rewrite the rules. Justification comes easy: urgency. With the nation's transit system allegedly under strain, expedited approvals are granted. Oversight is waived. Review processes are compressed. And the new bids come with looser conditions, faster payments, and fewer questions. The FAA in particular becomes a pawn. Air traffic control suffers from staff shortages, but not from lack of funding, just frozen disbursements. Modernization programs stall. Safety audits are delayed. Meanwhile, private aerospace vendors receive new consulting contracts for the very systems that were paused. This includes deals involving Elon Musk's growing empire of federally tied ventures. Starlink and SpaceX contracts, ostensibly for defense communication, satellite navigation, or launch coordination, often get restructured midstream. When shutdowns stall infrastructure programs, these firms are brought in not to complete paused work, but to reframe it under new scopes, typically with less public visibility. What began as modernization for public benefit quietly shifts to privatized space or defense initiatives, bundled into new awards with accelerated review and national security exemptions. Now that work doesn't happen. It does, but not as planned. Not with the partners originally vetted, and not with the transparency originally promised. What was a national infrastructure plan becomes a reshuffling of access. A budget delay becomes a bidding opportunity. And public urgency becomes private leverage. Health, human services. Pandemic response became a goldmine. Unvetted suppliers. Overpriced goods. Missing ventilators. Shutdowns gave cover, audits were suspended, reporting delayed. But the payments routed through intermediaries kept flowing. In retrospect, the COVID-19 pandemic of 2019-2020 exposed a brutal truth. The United States was not prepared, and worse, it was misled. Unlike the 1918 influenza pandemic, where lack of technology and communication were understandable limits, this time the failures were willful. Critical stockpiles had been allowed to expire. Response protocols were disbanded. Leadership was inconsistent, often contradictory, and driven by political optics rather than public health science. Testing was delayed. Messaging was confused. States were left to fend for themselves, competing for supplies in a federal auction where brokers and shadow middlemen drove up prices. Private companies were awarded contracts for masks, ventilators, and vaccines, many with no experience in health logistics. Some delivered substandard products. Some delivered nothing at all. Yet the contracts were paid. And today, there is no cohesive health department infrastructure. This exists in name and budget, but not in unified function. Agencies under its umbrella are fragmented, politicized, or hollowed out. Disease surveillance programs have been slashed. The CDC's credibility is fractured. There is no strategic reserve for the next wave. When the next pandemic hits, and it will move faster than our awareness of it. Detection systems are underfunded. Response teams are undertrained. Laboratories are underused. We may not recognize the threat until it's already spread. But meanwhile, the money flows. Preparedness grants continue. Biodefense budgets rise. Technology contracts multiply. It gives the illusion of readiness. In reality, we are funding the memory of a health department while the reality of public health collapses in silence. 6 on raping of the nation, the EPA. EPA, delayed enforcement, yet tech upgrades for internal monitoring went forward. The Environmental Protection Agency became another tool in the broader shell game. During shutdowns, enforcement operations are among the first to be paused. Field inspectors are furloughed. Site visits are cancelled. Fines, investigations, and environmental impact reviews are postponed indefinitely. To the public, it looks like a simple bureaucratic freeze. But behind the scenes, funding still flows not toward public protection, but toward internal upgrades. Investment in internal data systems, analytics platforms, and compliance monitoring software continues. These digital tools promise better long-term oversight, but without active field enforcement. They simply collect unverified information. The agency is effectively flying blind, dressed in new tech. Meanwhile, industrial polluters face fewer obstacles. Oil and gas permits move forward without scrutiny. Agricultural runoff violations go unchecked. Toxic waste transport routes continue uninterrupted. The silence of enforcement is misinterpreted as compliance. Some contracts for modernization are awarded during the shutdown window, avoiding competitive bids. Contractors are selected not because they read the most qualified, but because they read the most connected. Technology is procured, but not necessarily deployed. In short, the EPA remains funded but retooled from watchdog to window dressing. USDA. At the surface, the U.S. Department of Agriculture claims to support the American farmer, but in the deeper layers of budget distribution and commodity strategy. Shutdowns and selective funding windows reveal a different game, one rooted in arbitrage and strategic manipulation. When shutdowns stall oversight, USDA programs that offer relief to struggling farmers become political tools. Subsidies are redirected not to small family-owned farms, but to large agribusinesses with lobbying influence. Reporting is delayed. Waiver processes are rushed or quietly modified. Crop insurance payments are recalibrated in silence. But perhaps the clearest example of this manipulation came during the U.S.-China in retrospect trade war and was repeated in more subtle form during pandemic years. Take soybeans. American farmers lost billions in export value when tariffs locked them out of Chinese markets. USDA programs promised relief. Yet while local producers faced bankruptcy, certain well-connected entities were granted early exemptions or export licenses, allowing them to sell U.S. commodities to foreign buyers at inflated prices. In some cases, the U.S. government purchased surplus crops from domestic producers. only for those crops to be resold into international markets at discounted rates, often by intermediary firms with ties to the same policy architects who shape the tariffs. This is not just a national shell game. It is international arbitrage. Shutdowns make it easier to do this. With internal review boards paused, congressional oversight distracted, and media attention elsewhere, entire foreign trade arrangements can be rerouted or quietly reversed. Grants can be awarded. Contract terms can be rewritten. And American farmers, the ones featured in campaign ads and press releases, are once again left behind. Meanwhile, the money flows through grain silos, container ships, and shell exporters. And those who understand timing, policy shifts, and international loopholes reap profits not from harvest but from proximity, raping of the nation Department of Education. On the surface, the Department of Education continues to approve grant programs designed to support everything from early childhood learning to post-secondary innovation. Press releases tout billions in funding for under-resourced schools, technology access, teacher development, and community programs. The optics suggest robust federal support. The delivery tells another story. Grants that are approved on paper often stall midstream. Letters of obligation are issued, but disbursements are delayed, shut down for profit. In retrospect, matching fund requirements are quietly altered. Deadlines are extended without explanation. Schools and districts prepare to implement initiatives, only to find themselves in limbo. During shutdowns, these issues compound. Communication from the department slows or stops. Grant officers are furloughed. Application portals freeze. Timelines become moving targets. The programs remain active on federal records, appearing fulfilled, while on the ground, students and educators wait. In some cases, nonprofits and educational consortia are awarded grants but never receive their second or third tranches of funding. In others, new pilot programs are launched with fanfare, while prior commitments languish. There's no formal cancellation, just quiet evaporation. This uncertainty causes cascading effects. Local budgets are stretched thin to cover federal delays. Staff are hired and then laid off. Equipment goes unused. Programs collapse under the weight of waiting. Meanwhile, consulting firms and contractors tasked with capacity building, impact measurement, and technical support continue to build the department without interruption. The money doesn't disappear. It just flows sideways toward the infrastructure of appearance, not the substance of education. The result is a public education system under constant strain, not from lack of intent, but from weaponized inconsistency. Shut down for profit. In retrospect, the Department of Defense operates with the largest discretionary budget in the federal government. Yet it is also the least transparent. In times of shutdown, that lack of transparency becomes an asset for those seeking to exploit the system. Officially, many Pentagon operations are considered essential and remain funded even during government closures. But essential is a flexible term. What continues without pause are not necessarily the missions that protect national security, but those that preserve contract flows. Private defense contractors remain on retainer. Cyber surveillance operations are quietly expanded. Research into AI battlefield tech, predictive threat modeling, and biometric systems continues under reclassified funding lines. The black budget billions in unaccounted expenditures is untouched by oversight. Classified programs receive appropriations behind closed doors. Congressional review is cursory, often performative. And during a shutdown, even that cursory review is suspended. Shutdowns don't slow the defense economy. They conceal it. They provide a window in which audits are paused, inspectors are sidelined, and procurement cycles can be adjusted mid-flight. And this is where the grift thrives: overpriced drone contracts, redundant missile defense systems, and no-bid cybersecurity deals. Many routed through third-party vendors with political ties. Equipment is purchased not for strategic need, but to fulfill pre-existing contractor obligations. Meanwhile, the privatization of military functions accelerates. Intelligence analysis, forward operating logistics, even interrogation and detention services once done in uniform now outsourced. Private firms bill the Pentagon at multiples of military salaries. Shutdowns make this outsourcing easier. Temporary gaps in public workforce allow private firms to fill the void permanently. It's not about weakening national defense. It's about transforming defense into a for-profit enterprise, shielded by classification and justified by fear. The result, an ecosystem where money flows freely, accountability rarely arrives, and war becomes just another revenue stream. The Forensics on Raping of the Nation Department of Veterans Affairs VA. No department wears patriotic branding more than the VA. It is the institutional promise that those who served will not be forgotten. But in shutdown cycles, that promise becomes hollow. Veterans are asked to wait again. Hospitals delay surgeries. Claims processing halts. Mental health support services go dark. Regional offices close their doors with a sign, "Due to the government shutdown, this facility is closed." But while veterans are left waiting, the budget continues to move. Funds are rerouted into private healthcare pilots. Management contracts are expanded for third-party scheduling platforms. Data analytics firms receive grants to study outcomes while the outcomes themselves vanish. Shutdown for profit. In retrospect, these diversions are framed as modernization, but they serve as displacement. Public care is quietly replaced with private trials. Veterans become test subjects for systems still under development. In the shadows, vendor relationships multiply. Former officials return as consultants. New tech platforms emerge as gatekeepers to care. Veterans' access is now filtered through portals, apps, and help desk hotlines, many run by for-profit firms. The service member's sacrifice remains, with a system built to honor that service is quietly auctioned. It's not just a failure to deliver. It's a redirection of duty into margin. The Forensics on Raping of the Nation Department of Housing and Urban Development AUD. This isn't housing policy. It's a liquidation sale. AUD manages the safety net for housing in America. But in the cycles of shutdown and misdirection, that safety net becomes a trap. During a shutdown, public housing authorities don't receive their full allocations. Eviction protections lapse. Maintenance requests go unanswered. Housing vouchers are delayed. Tenants are blamed for what the system withholds. But behind the headlines of suspended services, a deeper scam operates: the redirection of AUD funding into private development deals. New programs are announced. Innovation zones, opportunity corridors, revitalization districts, they all promise community uplift. In practice, they become real estate arbitrage. Developers receive subsidies to build luxury apartments under the guise of mixed-income housing. Zoning rules are quietly changed. Tax breaks are extended. Meanwhile, public housing units are sold off or declared obsolete, making way for more profitable construction. Shutdowns accelerate this process. When local housing authorities are paralyzed, decision-making consolidates in Washington. Contracts are approved with minimal oversight. Land transfers are bundled with grant approvals, and the public never sees the transaction. The people most affected, low-income families, the elderly, the disabled, become displaced not by natural disaster or market failure, but by design. Shutdown for profit. In retrospect, Department of the Treasury. This is not fiscal responsibility. It is controlled chaos with a ticker symbol. If the Department of Defense wields the gun, the Department of the Treasury holds the pen. Its power is quiet but absolute. And during shutdowns, that pen is used to redraw the lines of financial control. The Treasury manages federal payments, borrowing, tax collection, and oversight of the financial system. When a shutdown hits, most of this machinery remains operational, but its discretionary layers become unchained. One of the key areas ripe for abuse is bond manipulation. Shutdowns create artificial volatility in the market. A threat of default even if manufacture alters investor behavior. The Forensics on Raping of the Nation treasuries are dumped or hoarded based on rumors. Large players with insider awareness of the shutdown scope or timeline profit from this movement. Short-term bond windows become moments of massive gain for those with foreknowledge. Meanwhile, crypto and digital laundering live in the regulatory blind spot. Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network (FinCEN) is often frozen or understaffed during shutdowns. Licensing approvals stall. Suspicious activity reports SARS backlog. And in that pause, blockchain-based money movement spikes. Tokens are minted, swapped, and shielded behind pseudonymous ledgers. Treasury's limited crypto oversight cannot keep pace. The result is a perfect moment to launder massive sums into the digital void, clean, staked, and reintroduced as liquid capital into shell companies. Even more concerning is how shutdowns are exploited to delay transparency rules. Public comment periods for new financial disclosure laws are paused. Regulatory reforms are kicked down the road. In the vacuum, market makers and high-frequency traders use AI bots to parse budget bills and adjust their holdings in real time while the public sees only delay. And let us not forget the debt ceiling drama. Each shutdown invites political theater around raising the limit, but behind the scenes, Treasury's extraordinary measures involve reallocating internal funds, suspending investments in retirement accounts, and quietly restructuring the schedule of debt servicing. The public hears default threat. The insiders hear arbitrage opportunity. All the while, crypto custodians, offshore holding firms, and bond speculators profit not despite the Treasury's paralysis, but because of it. Shut down for profit, in Retrospect, Department of Labor. This isn't just an absence of law. It's a profitable vacuum engineered to reward those who know how to operate in the dark. Department of Labor. The Department of Labor was built to protect the working class: wages, benefits, conditions, safety. But in a shutdown, those protections become optional. Enforcement agencies go silent. Inspections are postponed. Hearings are cancelled. And the very systems meant to defend workers are left unmanned. The forensics on raping of the nation OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, is often the first to go quiet. With reduced staff and frozen operations, workplace inspections drop dramatically. Employers know this. Violations go unreported. Accidents increase, but citations do not. Shutdowns give bad actors a green light to cut corners without consequence. Unemployment insurance becomes a paradox. The people most affected by a shutdown, federal workers, contractors, and adjacent service industries, are told to wait for benefits that are themselves underfunded. Processing times balloon. Appeals are stalled. The safety net tangles itself. Wage theft cases are frozen mid-investigation. Union complaints sit untouched. Legal deadlines lapse. Workers are not just delayed, they are denied. And amid this breakdown, the department's leadership often accelerates deregulation. Rule changes that would normally face public scrutiny are pushed forward under emergency exemptions or during periods when watchdog groups are distracted. Meanwhile, workforce development grants and retraining programs, often lifelines in struggling communities, are quietly suspended. Some are reprioritized. Others disappear entirely. The shutdown becomes the excuse. But the effect is deliberate. Worker protections don't fail. They are paused. With intent. And while the department stands still, private compliance firms and industry lobbyists step inches not to protect workers but to manage risk on behalf of employers. The result? A labor system where the rules don't vanish but their enforcement becomes a coin toss. How Trump benefits from shutting down OSHA. Trump benefits not from removing rules, but from removing the people who enforce them, with OSHA offline. Inspections stop, allowing Trump-aligned contractors and donors to cut corners and save money. Wage theft and unsafe labor practices go unchecked, especially in industries Trump has stakes in: construction, hospitality, detention. Private compliance consultants move in, often tied to Trump allies, creating pay-to-play labor protection. Unions lose power, grievances sit idle, and organizing slows without oversight. Public silence normalizes selective enforcement, setting a precedent for deregulation by attrition. Shut down for profit. In Retrospect, Department of Justice DOJ. The Department of Justice is the referee of the Republic tasked with prosecuting corruption, enforcing civil rights, and ensuring that no one, regardless of power, is above the law. But during a shutdown, that referee is removed from the game. Investigations stall. Prosecutors are furloughed. Court proceedings are delayed. Civil rights cases sit untouched. And the wheels of justice, already slow, grind to a near halt. This vacuum of accountability doesn't just delay justice. It creates a buffer for those under scrutiny. Shutdowns provide the perfect window for the politically connected to slip through procedural cracks. Deadlines expire. Discovery requests lapse. Evidence access is postponed. Witness coordination breaks down. The forensics on raping of the nation, and while high-profile criminal trials are postponed, the real value lies in what isn't seen. The quiet abandonment of white-collar investigations, fraud probes, and corruption cases involving federal contracts or campaign finance. Selective enforcement flourishes. Those out of favor remain targets. But allies, donors, or insiders receive delay, deflection, or quiet closure. The DOJ does not formally decline to prosecute. Instead, they simply defer to prioritize or disappear the case into bureaucratic obscurity. Oversight is stalled. Director General reports are paused. The Office of Legal Counsel becomes a tool of justification rather than a check on executive power. And then there's the chilling effect. Watchdog agencies, whistleblowers, and state attorneys general pause their actions too as uncertain of DOJ backing. What might have been prosecuted as a pattern of fraud is now reframed as a misunderstanding, a regulatory gray area, or an internal compliance matter. Meanwhile, during the shutdown window, legal interpretations are rewritten. Settlements are fast-tracked. Consent decrees are quietly renegotiated. It's not just the absence of justice. Instead, it's the repositioning of justice as a shield for those who hold power. The DOJ becomes less a firewall and more a selective filter, screening cases not by merit, but by political utility. And when the public asks what happened to a case, they are met with silence. Or worse, a well-worded update, pending review. Shutdown for profit. In Retrospect, Department of Energy Day. The Department of Energy is supposed to be the steward of America's future by balancing national energy policy, advancing innovation, and securing critical infrastructure. But in shutdowns, it becomes another tool of selective neglect for profit. Funding for clean energy programs, solar and wind research, and electric grid modernization is suspended. Grants go unprocessed. Lab partnerships freeze. Pilot programs pause midstream. This disproportionately affects renewables projects that rely on public-private coordination and predictable support. Meanwhile, fossil fuel operations experience little interruption. Legacy permits remain valid. Compliance inspections are delayed. The forensics on raping of the nation regulatory filings are deemed non-essential. The fossil lobby, already deeply entrenched, uses the shutdown to pressure for exemptions and accelerated approvals once the government reopens. The imbalance isn't accidental. The longer clean energy is stalled, the more profitable it becomes to continue relying on gas and oil. Grid resilience upgrades get delayed, keeping the system vulnerable to outages. These vulnerabilities later justify emergency spending not on green infrastructure, but on short-term fossil fixes. In the background, energy traders take advantage of the regulatory fog. Commodity markets fluctuate. Insider firms bet against stalled climate goals, while alternative suppliers seek short-term export windfalls. Shutdowns also stall cyber defense coordination for the energy grid. Interagency briefings are cancelled. Simulations for attack resilience are postponed. The system stays brittle. The public sees nothing until the next blackout. Behind the scenes, shutdowns shift power. Fossil lobbies gain ground. Clean energy loses momentum. And once again, what looks like dysfunction is opportunity, but just not for the future. Shutdown for profit. In Retrospect, Department of the Interior. It's a bait and switch. The parks closed for the public but open for profit. The Department of the Interior oversees our national parks and governs the land itself. Public lands, indigenous territories, wildlife protections, natural resources. But in a shutdown, the meaning of public shifts. National parks close their gates. Visitor centers shutter. Rangers are furloughed. Trails are left unmanaged. Public is turned away from its own land. And yet, drilling continues. Permits for oil, gas, and mineral extraction remain valid. Leaseholders continue their operations. Forensics on raping of the nation in some cases. New leases are even quietly finalized during the shutdown without the normal public hearings or environmental review processes. The absence of oversight creates a window of extraction. Wildlife protections go unenforced. Environmental impact studies are suspended. Violations go unrecorded. And the long-term damage isn't just ecological, it's procedural. Shutdowns are used to break regulatory rhythm. Once delayed, reviews are rescheduled under new leadership, new criteria, or dropped altogether. For tribal lands and indigenous communities, the shutdown is even more damaging. Essential services tied to federal land management such as water access, health clinics, transportation infrastructure are suspended. But commercial use of those lands often continues, deepening the exploitation. It's a bait and switch. The parks close for the public but open for profit. The illusion is that nothing moves. The truth is that shutdowns give private industry a head start while the public waits at locked gates. Shut down for profit. In Retrospect, Department of State. The Department of State projects American values abroad. But during a shutdown, those values become negotiable. Embassies reduce services. Diplomats operate with skeleton crews. Visa processing slows. Cultural programs are cancelled. And U.S. influence wanes just enough to give room for maneuver. While public diplomacy falters, another form of diplomacy accelerates: diplomatic laundering. ACA, the forensics on raping of the nation foreign aid oversight is paused. Funds already allocated continue to move, but without proper tracking. Projects meant for infrastructure, education, or humanitarian relief become opaque. Contractors on the ground face no immediate audits. Partner governments shift priorities without State Department accountability. This creates a unique loophole. Money moves internationally under the guise of foreign policy, but the watchdogs are asleep. Private firms with international ties are awarded consulting contracts with minimal competition. In fragile states, U.S. credibility shrinks, while private influence expands. Shutdowns also create room for back-channel deals. With official communications on hold, informal networks take the lead where former diplomats, intermediaries, and politically connected figures broker arrangements that bypass formal review. The lines between U.S. national interests and private financial interests blur. Meanwhile, humanitarian crises worsen. Refugee resettlement freezes. Disaster aid sits unprocessed. Peacekeeping funding stalls. But defense assistance, especially arms deals, continues. Shutdowns, ironically, streamline the parts of diplomacy that sell weapons, while freezing those that promote peace. The net effect: diplomatic posture becomes transactional. Influence is bought and sold, not negotiated. And shutdowns serve as the perfect cover for shifting priorities without public debate. It isn't just foreign aid that's frozen. It's the very idea of principled diplomacy. Shutdown for profit. In Retrospect, Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC). The SEC exists to protect market integrity. It monitors securities trading, enforces transparency, and prevents insider abuse. But when the government shuts down, so does the referee on Wall Street. Compliance deadlines are extended. Investigations pause. Surveillance systems are left to run on auto. And filings including quarterlies, amendments, disclosures sit unreviewed. In this gap, traders with access to pre-release earnings, pending mergers, or regulatory delays gain an unfair advantage. Forensics on raping of the nation markets become information ally imbalanced. The average investor sees noise. The insiders see signals. Shutdowns also delay the launch of new regulatory tools. Data mining systems meant to flag suspicious trading behaviors are left incomplete. Enforcement coordination with other agencies weakens. Pause becomes a blind spot. And while the CC freezes, lobbyists move. They push for exemptions, delay rule enforcement, or negotiate consent orders that expire without ever being enforced. Meanwhile, financial institutions use the shutdown to adjust algorithms, position holdings, or unwind risks without fear of immediate review. The narrative remains stable, markets are open, business continues. But the truth is, without active oversight, the rules of fairness are suspended. And in that window, billions can change hands before anyone sounds the alarm. Shutdown for profit. In retrospect, Federal Communications Commission (FCC). The FCC governs the airwaves and regulating media, telecoms, and digital infrastructure. Its job is to ensure fair access, competitive markets, and public oversight of the most powerful communication platforms in the country. But during a shutdown, the signal goes quiet. Licensing reviews are frozen. Merger evaluations stall. Enforcement actions pause. Complaints about misinformation, monopolistic behavior, or net neutrality violations go unanswered. And in that silence, power consolidates. Media conglomerates accelerate acquisitions. Spectrum licenses that would typically require public comment are fast-tracked once the doors reopen. Telecom giants adjust pricing models and data throttling practices while oversight is on hold. Independent broadcasters, meanwhile, face mounting uncertainty and legal limbo. The real question: who profits from the silence? The answer: those who need the fewest questions asked. Shutdowns give digital monopolies space to maneuver unchallenged. Disinformation flows more freely. Political ad networks operate with fewer disclosure demands. AI-generated content saturates platforms without regulatory guidance. Public interest programming is sidelined. Community broadband initiatives are delayed. Investigations into monopolistic coordination among ISPs are postponed indefinitely. When the FCC is sidelined, it's not just the rules that vanish, it's the accountability that connects public discourse to democratic norms. And those who profit are the ones already closest to the switch. The forensics on raping of the nation's salvage and sovereignty. This is not about restoration. It's about awakening. The system wasn't broken. It was hijacked, repurposed for private gain under public language. What comes next must be something new, a national reckoning and a strategy of reclamation. 1. Stop calling it incompetence. This isn't failure. It's precision theft marketed as bureaucracy. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. It is not subtle. It is systematized. 2. Build a public ledger and real-time live audits. Live ledgers. No more quarterly fiction. If money moves in minutes, oversight must match. Every contract should be traceable. Every disbursement visible. Transparency isn't utopian, it's overdue. 3. Criminalize the revolving door. Public office is not a launch pad for private fortune. Close the loop. Ban private contractors from returning to regulatory positions. Make insider deals a felony, not a handshake. 4. Track digital laundering at the contract level. Crypto is not the enemy. Obscure digital flow is. Every vendor must disclose tokenized assets. Every blockchain tool tied to federal funding must be federally transparent. 5. Emergency spending must trigger immediate review. If you can shift billions with a signature, then oversight must move just as fast. Every emergency appropriation triggers a 30-day audit, automated, independent, and permanent. 6. Create a national truth inquiry. Subpoena the shell game. Trace the red budgets. Release the vendor lists. Turn over the offshore logs. If we can't see where the money went, then we don't own the country it was taken. 7. Normalize whistleblowing, not silence. Whistleblowers are not traitors. They are the immune system of democracy. Silence is not safety, it is submission. Normalize dissent. Shield it. Reward it. 8. Make apathy or risk civic disengagement must come at a cost. If you serve in government and look away, you are complicit. If you are elected and do not resist, you are part of the theft. Let this not be a reform plan. Let it be a firewall. And let the firewall be made of names, receipts, and witnesses before the next shutdown makes memory optional.